New and unexpected relief for Donald Trump as he faces a ticking clock on his $454 million civil fraud judgment. A New York appeals court today deciding it will accept that much smaller bond, $175 million, agreeing to block collection if he puts it up within 10 days. So while he now has more time, Trump will still be forced to answer the question, does he or doesn't he have the money? This is what he said just moments ago.
Greatly respect the decision of the appellate division, and we will abide by that. We'll put up cash or bond very quickly, securities, cash or bond, whatever it is. We'll put it up very quickly, and we'll win the case. I have a lot of cash. You know I do because you looked at my statements. I mean, you've been examining my statements for a long time, and I have much more than that in cash. But I would also like to be able to use some of my cash to get elected.
So just a little while ago, Letitia James, the Attorney General, put out a new statement saying Donald Trump is still facing accountability for his staggering fraud. The court already found that he engaged in years of fraud to falsely inflate his net worth and unjustly enrich himself, his family, and his organization. The $464 million judgment plus interest against Donald Trump and the other defendants still stands. So now it's 10 days from now that Trump could face the grim possibility that Letitia James could freeze his assets or seize properties, which may well touch off yet another long and complicated court fight. NBC's Yasmin Vasugian is outside the courthouse in New York City. Also joining us, Sue Craig, investigative reporter for the New York Times and an MSNBC contributor. Back with us is Catherine Christian. I want to start with you, if I can, Sue, because the question here is how much money does Donald Trump have? Now that it's $175 million, can he pay it? Does anybody have the answer to that?
I'm sort of a bit of a I'll believe it when I see it person, and we'll see in 10 days if he can put it up or sooner. But it was interesting to hear the tone of his view on his cash position over the last few days. It felt like on the weekend the sky was falling. He had Eric Trump, his son, on TV, just practically screaming about how unfair this is. And then today it sounded like it was more like a parking ticket. It sounds like from what Donald Trump says, he's going to plan to pay in cash. Let's see how he does it. It was interesting if he does plan to pay in cash to note that in the E. Jean Carroll case where he had to also put up money for the appeal, he put it up in the form of a bond. It's cheaper to do it with cash because there's no fees associated. He can just put it up. But now, it's just when I think about this, it's gone from, $400 or $500 million to $175 million. And the appeals court, just for people who don't know, who haven't looked up the opinion, there was no reason why they adjusted it down at all. I mean, we're sort of left just wondering what happened. And also, I think it's, I think probably a lot of people are wondering why, and they're just not explaining it. And it does make you wonder how this is going to go for Donald Trump on appeal. He's certainly happy with reason today because of that.
Yeah, I mean, he's happy about it. And obviously, when you're talking about a 60% essentially cut in what he owes, so right. That's not insignificant. Having said that, you well pointed out that there was that $91 million bond that he already had to pay in the E. Jean Carroll case. So that's money or property or whatever it is that he doesn't have to put against this. And I'm just wondering if Donald Trump knows exactly how much money he has. I mean, it's a constantly.
I think he knows down to the decimal point.
He does know down to the decimal point because he certainly wouldn't answer the question when he was asked directly the question. Let me read it about whether or not he could talk about the timing of securing the bond. He didn't answer that question, even though he had said in a statement he could do it within the 10 days.
Right. I mean, it's frustrating for people listening because it's a privately held company and we don't know how much cash he has on hand at any given moment. We can see, you can look back in time and you can see he's gotten proceeds from things like, for example, he sold a hotel in Washington a few years ago and got more than $100 million for that. There's other things where there's money coming in, but we don't know the draws on his cash. So it's frustrating. You can see, we've The New York Times obtained decades of his tax returns. We know most of his businesses lose money, and he has to inject capital actually to keep them going. But his exact cash position, you don't know. But, you know, he sounded pretty confident today that he could meet this, and that's sort of what we're left with at this point. It went from the sky is falling to, like I said earlier, basically he's got to pay a parking ticket at this point.
All right, Yasmin, what more can you tell us about this ruling and what it might mean for Donald Trump?
So 10 days time, that's how much time he has to pay out, $175 million, as you guys were just talking about. He has to still have an independent compliance officer within his company. However, Donald Trump, along with his sons as well, can continue to operate as chief operating officers and or leaders of the corporation. That also came out of this ruling as well, which was obviously somewhat of a win for the former president as he sees this as an injustice. I will also say, though, amidst all of this, Chris, especially with the trial happening behind me and the set date for April 15th, we're also learning about the value of Truth Social and the Trump Media Company. And how that could kind of raise the former president's net worth as of tomorrow when it begins to be publicly traded $3 billion. Whether or not he could actually use his shares in that social media company as collateral is still in question. He'd have to seek out the approval from the board of Truth Social. But on the board is Donald Trump Jr., along with 3 other individuals who served in the Trump administration. So it's likely they would approve if he wanted to pull shares from there, or pull collateral, I should say, from there as well. But again, to Sue's point, whether or not he actually has the cash, despite the fact that he says he has that and then some, is really in question when he looks to that 10-day time period in which he needs to pay up.
So, Catherine, obviously there is a possibility. We don't know how big a possibility that come 10 days he may not have the money to secure that bond, the $175 million. I assume, Letitia James had made it clear that she was ready to go. If she could figure out how to get $454 million, one presumes for her, too, it's $175 million. How is she approaching this right now, this new ruling? Beyond what she said in the statement.
She will, if he doesn't come up with the money clearly within the 10 days, and he also has to perfect his appeal, she will start the process that she would have started tomorrow if he hadn't come up with the money, if he didn't get this reprieve by the appellate court. So I think the appellate court, some people have been critical of them. They probably said, where is he going and where are these buildings going? Remember, there's a monitor in place here. So they can't make
an independent
monitor, former federal judge Barbara Jones. This company can't do any financial maneuvers or transactions without her approval. So that could also be a reason. And they even stated in their decision that the federal monitor still stays in place. That could also be a reason why they did this.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.